So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged, and just to break up some of the more simple sort of 1v1 and 2v2 field battles on more flat maps, which is probably what's going to make up the majority of the preview battles, to be honest with you. But we did do a small sort of, well, a smallish sort of medium-sized siege on one of the maps that they have added, although this is a rather large map in and of itself, but I have actually seen this one before, and while I was playing the massive overhaul submod, I've seen this map before, albeit it was in a far more glitchy state then. It was sort of surrounded by this neon blue water. But I think that this is a map that has been in sort of the files of Third Age ever since it was made, but it hasn't actually been sort of available for selection. So I think they just sort of flicked a switch, as it were, and now you will be able to play this as sort of part of the Orc style settlements that are being added in the new patch. So we're going to do a 3v2 siege battle here. It was initially going to be a 3v4, which admittedly this map, because of how large it is, it does fit that a little bit more like a 5v3 or a 4v3. But as far as a preview battle goes, it will serve its purpose for now. And there are actually 4 Elven factions on display, 3 of which are on the attack, 1 is on the defence alongside Arthur Dane. But we'll look at my army first, because I can tell you the thinking a little bit more behind my pick and why I chose the units that I did. Got a couple of units of Lorien swordsmen over here, so of course I'm playing as the Elves of Lothlorien, which I think this is the first time I have shown these guys, in their new form anyway. And yeah, the Lorien swordsman obviously slightly more armoured than the Sindar Blade Master, which the Sindar Blade Masters are now exclusive to Lothlorien. They can hide, of course, which makes them more suitable for ambushes, but in this situation, in a siege, ambushes are going to be a much, if you're going to do an ambush, it'll probably be on the defensive side of things. So I decided to bring the more durable Lorien swordsman. The vast majority of my infantry is made up of the Sylvan Spearmen, however, and that was mainly because I couldn't afford to bring the Sylvan Heavy Spearmen. And the Spearmen, of course, can still form shield wall, and they will be good at pushing through lines, at least that was my thinking here. Even though the Elves are a little bit more lightweight than normal, the Spearmen should still be able to push pike formations out of the way, which could potentially be a bit of a problem for us. I've also got 3 units of the Lorien Axemen. Shield and Axe units are now no longer AP, I don't believe, but the Lorien Axemen are cheaper than the equivalent Lorien swordsman, because of course they do now have a sword and shield unit as well, but I decided not to bring them because they are a little bit more expensive, and when you're on the attack you have to save money somewhere. I've also got, I think, 3 units or perhaps 4 units of Edhill Tirith. So these are obviously the light elven archers, the lowest tier archer I could bring. I wanted to have a large archer presence because I felt like trying to engage in a skirmish battle with the defenders might prove to be a mistake, but at the same time there are 3 elven factions on the attack, so we'll see how it works out. I've also got a unit of elven javelins over here, of course, previously the Elder Council, so I've got some close range punch. And then my general is a unit of Galatharan nobles, of course, previously the veteran warriors. Very expensive, 1400 florins, but hopefully how deadly they are can make up for that cost. As we move over to my first ally over here, we've got Lord of Belagos playing as Lyndon with their new faction emblem, which was added in one of the hotfixes that has come out recently. He's got some 4 Lyndon Marines and some Mithlond Marines, so a healthy amount of javelins, which, provided they can get close to the walls, is good, but if they get, obviously they are quite liable to get sprayed down by the defensive position because there's a lot of arrow towers, and of course we're up against Mirkwood, so they're going to be bringing the archers, as it were. And then we also have 3 units of Harlinden infantry here at the front, going to be pushing the siege equipment into position. A couple of units of Mithlond pikemen over here as well, which I think actually are the higher tier pikes if we get close. Yes, they are. So he's invested a little bit more heavily in his pikes, but he is going to need to support them. He's also got some 4 Linden archers over here. He's got some Wardens of Harlinden, which I think are, yes they are, they are an archer cavalry. He's also got his Mithlond nobles over here, the javelin chariot units. That's how they differ from Rohan, who of course use archers. And he's got some Noldorin Blade Masters, a very powerful two-handed swordman unit. I think in that respect they are the strongest the elves have to offer. They are certainly better, I think, than the Eldarenway swordsman, the Lorien swordsman, and I think the Hiri Bang, not the Hiri Bang, the Hiri Lang as well, but I'll have to go into that in a little bit more detail. I could do some unit comparison videos if people wanted me to do that. We've also got some Mithlond Blade Masters over here and another unit of Mithlond Blade Masters. I would slightly worry that he's gone a little skirmish heavy, although I've done that as well, but he hasn't got many infantry units. And of course he has also got that cavalry, which might be good to answer enemy cavalry sallying out. But we'll see how this goes. We've also got Dark Elven King over here playing as Imladris. He's got the Eldar Makar. I have to say I'm a bit of a fan of Imladris in this new patch. They're certainly much more my speed than they were before. And he's got another 4 units of Eldar Makar, and actually no, he's got 3 units of them. then he's also got some Imladris Guardians. Actually, if we look in closer here, you can see that they've got the upgraded unit models. They've got the slightly more armour. And then if we move backwards into some of his more elites over here, we can see he's got more Imladris Guardians. He's got some Imladris Blade Masters, some Eldarenway Archers, some Eldarenway Swordsmen, some Noratirno Warriors, and some more Blade Masters. So again, it's going to be interesting to attack with 3 Elven factions. Admittedly, maybe one of us should have sort of varied it up a little bit, but even so, we're going to have fewer men to attack with. But hopefully once we get into melee, we can start pushing the defenders off their walls. Having said that, based on our opponents, it's not going to be easy to do that, because we are facing Arthur Dane, who is played by Creed. He's got some Fornost Arraign defenders, which previously the Peacekeepers. So obviously this is the Spearman unit, I think. Yes, indeed. So here we have the spears. So it's going to be difficult, I think, for the elves to push through quickly. But in terms of skill, they're going to have the advantage over Arthur Dane's defences over here. The Hobbitry and arms, they are going to be. It's ambitious to think they're going to get any kills, but they will provide a buffer for stuff like these Dunedain Trollslayers, who can potentially do a huge amount of damage provided they aren't focused down by archers. And then we've got some Arthur Dane men-at-arms over here, some Dunedain Rangers in the back, and then he's got some Dunedain Bodyguard and some Hiri Bang over here from Mirkwood. So this was something that, well, I'll say now that the defenders went skirmish heavy, which of course you're going to do if you're Mirkwood, and Arthur Dane as well. They're one of the most skirmish heavy human factions, so it's going to be a rather strange sort of siege. We have some Woodland Patrol over here, and as we go down to the sort of defensive positions over here, we have the Arthur Dane men-at-arms. We have some Anuminous Gate Guards, who don't have multiple HP anymore, but they are still a very elite pike unit. Then he's got some dismounted Fornost Arraign Knights. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. They've added more things that are difficult to pronounce into the game now. Previously, of course, the Arthur Dane Knights. Then we've got the Dunedain Trollslayers, more men-at-arms, more light archers, and then as we move backwards, more Woodland Patrol. And then up here we have some Elven Javelins, Thranduil's Bodyguard, some more Elven Javelins, some more Bang, and of course the Elder Kingsguard, previously an extremely powerful cavalry unit. They are still, but they aren't quite as durable as once they were. But we shall get on with the battle at hand. 24,000 frames for a siege is less than I normally have, but then that's usually because I do 8-player sieges that involve enormous choke point fights. So we shall see how this goes. Now, for me, this was probably the first mistake as the attackers that we made. Balagost is sending up his siege equipment here, his towers and his ram. And I believe the thinking behind this was he wanted to get the siege equipment set up and do as much damage as he could with the units, and then I would reinforce. The problem with this is you've got 3 units of Harlingen infantry over here. With all the best will in the world, these guys are very good. As far as sort of basic Elven units go, they are probably the strongest. I think they are better than the Eldar Makar of Imladris, although I'm not entirely sure about that. These are 3 units which are going to lose heavily to the defensive positions over here, and they're not going to get very many kills in return, to be honest with you. Even they may be better than the Arthur Dane men-at-arms 1-to-1, but the defenders are going to have the advantage of these arrow towers and these archers over here. And of course, Linden are not the most heavily armoured faction. In fact, they are one of the lightest factions in the game. They might even be the lightest in terms of armour values. So this is going to be a very rough area of the battlefield for them to be in. And honestly, I feel as though if he was going to do this, he probably should have waited for me to arrive and we could have pushed our armies together, and that would have made up for our relative lack of numbers, because we then could have formed more of a clenched fist, as it were. And then we have the Elder Kingsguard are actually sallying out, which is not the worst idea in the world, because with the support of these archers over here, they should be able to just cut through these Harlingen infantry, which is going to be very bad for these Linden Lightfoot units. However, the Elder Kingsguard are not quite as durable as once they were, so trying to push through the thickest part of the line has led to several of them dying. And if they go out there, the main Linden line does have pikes in it, and they do have horse archers, so ultimately these Elder Kingsguard will probably end up falling here. Which of course does mean that the mistake of sort of sending forward these Harlingen infantry essentially to their deaths does kind of balance out, because that means a very expensive unit in this cavalry is likely going to fall very easily. Having said that, it is 3 units of infantry that we have lost, and if there's one thing that we do need to use quite sparingly in this fight, it is our infantry. Had I known that my ally here in Linden had gone more skirmish heavy, I probably wouldn't have bothered with as many skirmishers and tried to go for Lothlorien's infantry a little bit more, because I don't mind being the cannon fodder in a fight, albeit elves are never really cannon fodder, but you know. And then over here we can see Dark Elven King is also moving forward with his Eldar Makar, and you know, we've already seen these guys in action. They will make mincemeat of lower tier units. The Eastron clansmen, even when they were upgraded, were no match at all for these very basic elven units. If we look back here, of course, the Hobbitry arms are going to suffer a very similar fate. The Arthur Dane men-at-arms will be able to at least hold the Eldar Makar, but 1-to-1 I would suggest they would win. But what's really going to swing this fight once again is the elves overall have got not as high armor values as other factions have. I mean, I think the dwarves have obviously got the most, followed by the humans, and then the orcs and the elves are kind of lower down because the orcs focus more on numbers, the elves focus more on skill, that sort of thing. So it is going to be quite important in battles like this to really get the elves into melee as quickly as possible, because if you stay out of range and sort of if you stay sort of in range of the enemy's skirmish fire, then you're going to start taking some pretty hefty losses. The elves have always been kind of difficult to use on the attack because of this reason. You can find yourself getting bled by the sort of natural defences of fortresses, more so than other factions, because every man you lose is going to be felt much more harshly than, say, you know, this would be no problem at all if we were just sending forward a bunch of Orc Marauders from Gundabad, for example, because who cares about the Orc Marauders? Whereas all three of our attacking armies have got very little in the way of throwaway units. Obviously, I've got more probably than my allies in the sense that I've got 6 units of Sylvan Spearmen and 4 units of low-tier archers. But Linden especially have gone for, essentially, these 3 units of Harland infantry were kind of the throwaways for Linden. You can see that these Elder Kingsguard, there are only 2 of them remaining, so they have essentially lost. However, unfortunately for us also, this ram has kind of, the crew of the ram have kind of gone around the gate, so this map is obviously a little bit buggy, but, you know, obviously, stuff like that can be ironed out, but I guess there is a reason after all that this wasn't included in the vanilla 3rd age, because I have seen this map before, and I think they did mention that they found sort of maps that have not really been used. But it is a cool looking map. I mean, obviously it is Orc in nature, so it's going to be one of the Orc style settlements that they've added, and I think Khan-Doob is the working name of it currently. And as we can see here, we'll get in a bit closer to the siege towers. The Harlanden infantry is about to exit and go onto the walls. The Arthur Dane men-at-arms are waiting, however, and the Harlanden infantry has already taken some pretty substantial losses. And this does mean, of course, that the Arthur Dane men-at-arms, with their numbers, are probably going to just be able to blob up and completely overwhelm. Now, what I probably would have done, I did see my ally Imladris going down here, but seeing how this was playing out, I was thinking of asking my ally if I should just go down the middle, even though I deployed way over there, which again, deployment zones in Medieval 2 have always been a little bit finicky. But again, I probably should have gone down the middle, but I saw my ally going, so I thought, well, I'll reinforce Linden. Linden's gone pretty skirmish heavy. And then we can see over here Arthur Dane. Putting up a valiant defence in the face of this Linden attack, but again, it is more of a probing attack than anything, because my ally was sort of very reluctant to send up support for these infantry units, because of course we haven't really been opened up on by the enemy skirmishers as yet, other than the low tier Elves of Mirkwood, Edhill, Tirith, of course a unit they share with Lothlorien, because I brought quite a lot of them as well. If you look back here, we've got these Dunedain Troll Slayers. There's more low tier Mirkwood archers as well as Woodland Patrol in the background, and then we've also got the Dunedain Rangers ready. So the more that we push, the more that we're going to sort of expose ourselves to the defensive skirmishers, but the defenders did go skirmish heavy, and so this is exactly the sort of thing that they're going to want to see. You look over here, you can see the Woodland Patrol with their sort of their armour. You can see that they've got almost an Orc style pauldron over here. Woodland Patrol of Mirkwood. Again, I believe these guys qualify as rangers. They are quite lightly armoured. You know, mostly anything with a hood I kind of assume is a ranger, and anything with armour I assume isn't, but then the elves don't really have much in the way of armoured archers anyway. Kind of one apiece, I think. You can see the Woodland Patrol are now quickly retreating off the wall before the sort of basic Imlad. I hesitate to call the Eldar Makar low tier, but for the purposes of this, yes. The low tier High Elven infantry is going to get into melee with them, and of course that is where the High Elves should shine. You can see that the High Elves have actually, the engagement is underway over here, but in a similar vein to on the other side, these individual units of Eldar Makar are just getting stonewalled by the Arthur Dane Spearmen and the men-at-arms. Now this is the problem with being the elves. You have to be aggressive, you have to push. You know, if you don't push up more than 1 or 2 units, you're just going to get swamped by the defenders. However, if you push up all of your units, the enemy skirmishers are going to get you. And you can see these Imladris Guardians are coming forward now. These Eldar Makar, however, have already been cut pretty substantially down to size. The spears will need the help of these men-at-arms and these hobbits to keep this fight up. You can see now, though, that in back here, the Hin-E Dower, a unit that was previously hidden. Another variant of Mirkwood Archer. Yeah, Mirkwood are definitely the most Archer-focused of all of the Elven factions, so if that's your sort of playstyle, then Mirkwood will still suit you very well. It's just now Mirkwood doesn't have quite the same level of muscle in melee as they had in the last patch, because of course that was a little bit over the top. And now if we look over here, you can see that the Eldar Makar is taking some close range fire from the Woodland Patrol. Only 55 of them left. A lot of them have fallen on the way to this area. So the Woodland Patrol might actually be able to stand their ground in melee a little bit more than they otherwise would be able to. And they are actually shooting point blank, it would seem, because they're still reloading. This is one of the things, in order to get a unit to stop firing, sometimes you have to actually actively order your men to sort of advance into them. It's a bit of a pain. I've had that with crossbows before in the past as well, but again, these are the sort of mechanics that are here. And over here, these Woodland Patrol are shooting into the backs of these Imladris Guardians, and they are falling away very quickly. And they're also up against the Dismounted Knights. And the Dismounted Knights in the past, obviously in the previous patch, they were one of Arthedain's best infantry units, and that's still the case now. Obviously everything in general will have sort of less defense value, so things will likely be a little bit more even across the infantry engagements, but here with this sort of firing point blank into the backs of these Imladris Guardians, they're going to melt very, very quickly. So far, the defenders have had it all their own way, really. And you can see now that these lower tier Mirkwood archers are also firing. You can see that the initial assault from the Harlanded infantry basically did nothing. These Arthedain men-at-arms did take a few losses, but ultimately a whole unit of Harlanded infantry has fallen. And it's a very similar story on the other side, so a very well laid out defence so far by the defenders. And we can see now that my ally is sending up his pikemen first. I was very surprised he did this again. I was sending forward my spearmen, and I was expecting him to let me lead the way, especially considering that these higher tier pikemen are going to be very, very vulnerable to all of the skirmish fire that's going to be brought down upon them. And my spears, my Sylvan spearmen, are shielded, and one of the more, expendable units we have. And obviously I sent forward a big cluster of spearmen because I was expecting to have to engage these pikemen in melee, and I could hopefully push through them with my spears. One problem that I did notice before going in through the gate of these guys, obviously the Troll Slayers waiting for the gate to be pierced, and then they'll let forth a volley, which the Dunedain Troll Slayers are one of the more damaging javelin units in the game that I have noticed thus far. Well, if we look back over here, we can actually see that there is a more serious Imladris unit being engaged. However, the Imladris Guardians are largely all gone, but at this point the Imladris Blade Masters are coming into melee, and the Blade Masters will make fairly quick work of knights that have been in melee for a long time. Obviously Imladris, with their skill, those very large two-handers, they're going to be able to slice their way through the forest arrayed knights, Fornost arrayed knights. What's with Tolkien and making a bunch of stuff that's awkward to say? So the Eldar Makar and the Blade Masters on this side, again, is a very similar story, though. They are essentially being shot in the back. You can see all my spears there in shield wall, getting ready to move in. We'll just quickly head over there, but we'll just do a cursory glance over what's happening to Imladris. And this is the problem again. This is where I should probably have taken the middle myself, because Imladris have spread themselves very thin. The Elder Enway Spearmen are here, but they haven't really made any sort of inroads on this side against the defenders. So meanwhile, if we go back over to here, we can see the attack is now happening through the gate. I've also sent forward my Sylvan Axemen to attack the walls. So this time we're going to attack with a more comprehensive force on all fronts.
The enemy's walls belong to us now.
Somewhere we've captured some walls. Now these spearmen are getting in. I'm just going to wait until more of them get in through the gate before I try and push through these Annuminous Gate Guards, because I don't want to just push into them and then die very quickly, because then we can't really afford to lose 3 more infantry units at this point. And again, the enemy skirmishers have been pretty lethal so far, but they have gone for a very skirmish heavy army. Oh, hello, Silver Surfer units over here. The Arthedain officer units obviously aren't fully implemented yet. See over here, there's more knights. Also, my skirmishers, I sent forward some of my low tier skirmishers to hopefully draw some fire, and also I'm going to start firing into the Troll Slayers to hopefully get Creed to panic a little bit and move them. You can see over here as well that some Sylvan Axemen are coming in to engage these already pretty bloodied Arthedain men-at-arms, and as soon as more of them drop down, with how much damage they've already taken, I should be able to force my way through here. And it's a similar story on this side, although this is something I was very confused about. My ally sent his pikemen up onto the walls, which traditionally the pikemen shouldn't really be sent onto the walls. Again, I was hoping that he was going to send his pikemen in behind my spears, because as you can see, my spears, when they all bunch up, they can push their way through these pikes. And I was hoping that in behind them I would have the Mithlon pike support so that my spears didn't start to struggle, because when the melee fight starts to sort of normalise, my spears are going to start to struggle against these sort of very skillful Arthedain knights. And when the pikes sort of manage to reform, my spears aren't going to stand a chance against them. Instead, however, the Mithlon pikemen are up on the walls, which admittedly we are winning the walls because of that, but my spears need those pike support. I had to send up another unit of my spears that I had in reserve that were also taking arrow fire, so admittedly I didn't have much of a choice but to sort of commit them. You can see that my Lorien axemen are also taking more fire from these Dunedain rangers, so the enemy skirmish line is really proving its worth today. Arthedain certainly has archers that can go toe-to-toe with the elves. Maybe not beat them, but they don't look out of place in this company, put it that way. These Woodland Patrol, victory is a distinct possibility, amazingly enough. I think that's because these Imladris Blade Masters are probably under archer fire. If we look back here, you can see these Dunedain Rangers are moving into position. Over here, the Hobbitry in arms and the Woodland Patrols stand over the bodies of the conquered dead. And then if we move back over to here, you can see that Imladris, their assault has largely been stopped. These Eldarenway Spearmen are the only ones left alive, and they are being cleaned up by this unit of fairly bloodied Arthedain men-at-arms. And over here we can see those Fornost defenders. And once again over here you can see these Noldor Elder nobles, which were hidden previously, but they're taking a beating from the enemy defensive towers. They're trying to shoot against the Dunedain Troll Slayers, but again that's not really going to be an efficient use of their ammunition. At this point Imladris has largely been defeated. Really the key mistake early on that we made here was one of us should, again, Lyndon could have deployed in front of this gate, so perhaps the smart thing to do is have Lyndon attack down the middle and then just wait for me to advance into position. The deployment zones are not great on this map, but even so that's not really an excuse when you can move into position. So I think maybe Lyndon should have taken the middle route and then waited for me to move into position over here. Instead, it's going to turn into we're going to have to concentrate our forces at this point. We've lost too much to sort of split our forces, and as you can see, my Lorien axemen are taking a pounding from the archers, which are way back here. They are shooting through the walls, but that's only because you can't actually get on top of this wall. You can see these Hiri Bang are firing into our forces. Having said that, things aren't going too badly down here. My spears aren't, they have been stopped. They did manage to push through the pikes initially. However, these Woodland Patrols started shooting into their back, so I had no choice but to send forward a unit of my Lorien swordsmen, which in terms of pure melee infantry is probably the most damaging infantry I was able to bring. So these Woodland Patrol are going to run off, because of course in melee they won't stand a chance against. I've only lost about 3 or so men in this unit. You can see that my Lorien axemen are taking a beating, and those Mithlon pikemen are also now all dead against the Arthedain men-at-arms and the archers of the enemy. The Woodland Patrol are leaving, but you can see that reinforcements are arriving from the other side of the battle for the defenders. As a result of Imladris largely folding at this point, it's going to be up to my army and Lord of Belagost with Lyndon. We do have a lot of skirmishers still alive though, so if we can bait the enemy maybe into using all their ammunition, we can sort of turn the tables a little bit, but that's not something you should really ever be relying on, particularly not when you're going up against Merkwood. You don't really want to be accepting arrows to the face. And here you can see my Lorien swordsmen just getting melted by the enemy skirmishers. The Woodland Patrol are coming back. You can see these 4 Lyndon Marines are over here as well. The javelins. They're firing their javelins into these pikes. The pikes are starting to buckle, but they've done their job. They've held us up long enough for the defensive skirmishers to do their job, their work, I should say. And then if we move back over here, are there any Imladris units left? I mean, there was a couple of Noratirno warriors that are breaking over there. If we look back over here, there's more Noratirno warriors back here, but only 16 of them. The towers will probably just destroy them, to be honest with you. The towers are part of the game. You've got to learn to deal with them. Over here we can see Eldarenway archers moving into position, as well as the Noldor Elder nobles, but at this point Imladris doesn't really have much of a chance. They have simply too few men, and they're going to just be overwhelmed by any one of these units, really. You can see that there are actually Eldarenway swordsmen back there as well, but Dark Elven King took it upon himself to cover 2 gates, when really we should have covered 1 gate each. I mean, that was the clever thing to do, but in the end, I spawned in the corner, unfortunately for me. But again, I'm not really into sort of telling my allies what to do during the battle. I feel like that's a bit presumptuous of me. And everyone wants to have fun, and they're not going to have fun if people are being belittled halfway through the fight. And here we can see the spears. The Battle of the Spears, although most of my Sylvan Spearmen at this point have been destroyed. You can see over here these Dunedain Troll Slayers, who have been wreaking havoc on my line as well. I think they've been throwing their javelins up here again. The Mithlon Blade Masters, they don't even have shields to defend them, unlike my Lorien Axemen. So they're going to fall even faster to the Mirkwood Archers. The one unit of Sylvan Axemen I had left, I have to send through the gate, otherwise our position is going to be lost. Trying to back up these four Linden Marines. But we can see over here the Hobbitry in Arms has come over to sort of shore up the front line. Meanwhile, it's the same similar story over here, the Mithlon Blade Masters. We are being filled full of arrows. I mean, look at all this. Dunedain Rangers, Elder Council, more Dunedain Rangers, Woodland Patrol. There's more Woodland Patrol on the way from the front with Imladris. It's not a good time to be an attacker over here. Being filled full of holes. But again, they do only have so much ammunition, and we do still have more back here. Of course, I've still got some of my low-tier archers. I think I've actually sent some of them into melee that are out of ammunition. I mean, if we look at what's left, you can see I've got some Galathrim Nobles. I've also got some Sylvan Spearmen. Admittedly, I've been a little bit more gung-ho with my forces. You can see that mostly I've been going through the gate and Lyndon has been going up onto the walls. Splitting our forces like that, again, is not really the most clever thing to do. I still think that those pikes should have gone through the middle, but even if the pikes had gone through the middle, they probably would have just been shot by the archers anyway. And here we can see the Dunedain Troll Slayers holding the line. You can see that some of my archers that are out of ammunition are in melee, but they're not exactly the most heavy-duty unit. The Sylvan Axemen, however, are doing me pretty proud at the moment. Admittedly, they are taking a lot of arrow fire, but their shields will make it so that they will survive a little bit longer. They are not AP anymore, of course, so they won't quite carve their way through these armoured Arthedain spears quite so quickly as once they did. But Lothlorien, as far as most mid-tier units go, they are better than the other elves. They're certainly the elves which are the most aggressive in terms of nature. At least in my opinion. They have the most units that you could sort of make a more aggressive army with. Meanwhile over here you can see these Eldarenway Archers and Noldor Elder Nobles forming a cluster, along with the Eldarenway Swordsmen, performing a protective ball. Rather like penguins, you don't really want to be on the outside, because again, over here it's still a very similar story, albeit more concentrated. We've got a single unit of Hiri Bang. Oh, and there's also units behind the wall up there. Presumably another unit of Elven Archers, which are just tearing into what remains of Dark Elven King's army. Imladris. And this is where having a more balanced army would have suited us. Initially we did have a 3v4 going, but unfortunately someone crashed and then we lost another player, so we had to do a 3v2. In that fight it would have been a different spread of armies. It wouldn't have been so much of an elf Royal Rumble. You can see that I did have another unit of Sylvan Spearmen that I sent forward. I think it was actually 2 units of Sylvan Spearmen, and I finally broke these pikes. Finally, we've managed to get in through the gates, although how useful this will be to us is debatable, because the enemy still have ammunition, and they haven't used their Thranduil's bodyguard yet, I don't believe. Having said that, the Dunedain bodyguard is on the way over here. If we look up here, they've still got the Hiri Bang, they've still got the Thranduil's bodyguards, although up here is where we should be really worried. They still have these Troll Slayers, but more worryingly, they've got a couple of units of dismounted Knights of Anuminas, which even if we do have the skirmish advantage in the late game, that unit, arrows are going to bounce off there. Fortunately, we do have javelins. Lyndon have got a couple of units of javelins. I've still got my Elven javelins. And Lothlorien and Mirkwood do still share some units in common, if not Sindar Blade Masters. Obviously, you've seen the Edhill Tirith, the very low-tier archer, for elves, low-tier, that they both share. And they also share the javelin unit in common. You might have to look over here. I've got my other unit of Lorien Swordsmen coming up again. At this point, there wasn't really anything else to do. We'd already lost so many men trying to take this gate that if we kind of fell back, we wouldn't have enough to sort of mount another assault, so we had to keep it going. I've got all of these spears over here, sending in these swordsmen. I'm going to try and get in behind. There goes the Imladris general. Going to get my Lorien swordsmen into melee against the Dunedain Rangers, and of course my heavy Elven swordsmen will make mincemeat of those Rangers, provided they don't get shot by arrows, which of course they will, because of all of the archers the defenders have. And over here you can see this is the last stand of Imladris. Noldor Elder Nobles almost all gone, and that will mean that we are going to have to deal with all of the enemy forces coming towards us. And you can see over here, Initially, this unit had just over 70 men in it. Already, they've lost around 20. Fortunately, the hobbits are breaking, so my Sylvan Axemen have managed to stay in melee for a decent amount of time and get quite a lot of kills. But ultimately, my Lorien Swordsmen, again, we just looked over to the left for a couple of seconds. They've already lost another 10 men. And this shows the vulnerability of the elves. If you can keep them at arm's length and shoot them, regardless of which one of the elven factions it is, you should do quite well for yourself. Imladris will be a little bit more resistant to it, but of course they were a lot more spread out in this fight, so they didn't really get to show their true mettle, as it were. You can see over here that the Elder Council Guards. We've also got another, perhaps even bigger problem over here, because we do have the Elven Javelins, and they are going to do a ton of damage. Javelins, of course, very potent. But at this point, I decided to do something kind of strange. I decided to group up what little of my well, I've got 3 units of low-tier archers, I think, and I was going to plant them right here behind my spears, and I was just going to sort of form up a Death Star of archers and try and focus down one unit at a time, because at this point we have to focus on targets. I mean, if we look at the balance of power, it's already going against us. We are a pretty substantial amount behind, 15%, although not an impossible amount to overturn, it must be said. So despite the fact that we've kind of approached this battle all wrong, we do still have a chance of this, and part of this is down to the fact that I do think the defenders' compositions are quite risky in a way. Going very skirmish heavy like this does leave you open to not having enough melee infantry units to cover the whole defence. Now in this case, because they were facing off against 3 elven factions, it's more likely to work, but if you're facing off against the orcs, this isn't going to work, because they're going to be able to absorb more casualties than most, and they're going to be able to find ways in behind your lines and sort of occupy you with trash and then push forward with their nastier stuff and smash your line to splinters, as it were. But the Elves of Mirkwood proving their worth in this fight here so far. They are possibly the most skirmish-focused faction, definitely at long range, of all of the factions in the game. Some of the Linden Mithlon Marines are getting into melee against these elven javelins, but the elven javelins, I think they are slightly better than they once were in melee. At least they haven't been nerfed as heavily as most things have, so they should overall be better. Meanwhile, we can see over here the Sylvan Spearmen. The initial defence of the enemies has been broken, so we are able to push in a little further. Mithlon Marines coming forward that are out of ammunition. They are javelin units. We're engaging these Thranduil's bodyguard in melee with my my Lorien Axemen and the Mithlon Marines. We're still having to deal with a lot of archers, but as you can see, most of the enemy melee infantry are the ones that we're facing over against Imladris, so they now have to be brought over to here, because we do still have some infantry. I'm also bringing forward my own elven javelins. Up here we can see the Noldorin Blade Masters getting up onto the walls. I'm also sending forward my Galatharan nobles in the background there. And we also see those 4 Linden archers up on the walls. So at this point we are actually able to sort of get a decent front going, most of it. So you can see my archers are sort of blending in with the corpses over here. I'm firing against these Elder Council. We actually managed to cut down a couple more of the Dunedain bodyguard and force them into retreat. Things aren't looking good still though, because the enemy elite skirmishers are still going to be very strong in melee. We've got here Ebeng coming forward as well, which not bad in melee either. My javelins are trying to fire point blank into the Thranduil's bodyguard, but Rules obviously noticed this, so he's going to try and sort of go around and make it more difficult for me to hit them. We've also got more Beng on the way. And also this unit of Mithlon Marines is getting overwhelmed by the Elder Council Guards. And there's also the Arthedain armoured units coming forward, the spears and the melee infantry. And those Noldorin Blade Masters, there are 47 of them. The unit seems a little bit split up though, there's a couple of them here. They're still sort of filtering in. Towers are very slow at getting the men onto the walls, of course. Can't expect a lightning reaction force from them. My archers are still trying to do their best, firing at the enemies as they try and set up. The Elder Council Guards over there are largely all dead at this point. We focus them down pretty well. My Elven Javelins are trying to get into a good position, but this unit of Beng, I think, is trying to sort of engage them in melee, so I'm going to try and sort of run them away. Try and get them into a position where I can shoot, because the Javelins might still be something that can drag us back into this match, provided I can focus down the right targets. It's going to be difficult. There is still a unit which we have yet to see, which could potentially be very useful for us. If we look over here, it has actually sort of come back a little bit, only 11% different, so we've managed to pull it back by 4%. Admittedly, it's not sort of coming back in our favour quickly enough for this battle to go in our favour. We're going to need to really start to cut them down to size. My archers trying to fire into these spears as they advance, but of course these armoured Arthedain spears with their shields are going to be able to withstand the Elven archer fire better than our infantry was able to stand up to the defenders' archers. My Elven javelins getting a volley into those Hiri Bang, cutting a few of them down. And these 4 Linden archers getting into melee now. Meanwhile, if we look over here, these Mythlon Marines have done a pretty good job against these Elven javelins so far. I think my Elven javelins are going to try and help finish them off, so we've got a corner that we can try and camp. And then over here we can see that the Elder Council Guards now getting into melee with their axes. Pretty lethal unit indeed. I'm trying to get my Galathran nobles up onto the walls. I'm taking fire while I'm doing that though, of course, because they are a very deadly unit. 1,400 florins for them. And the Bang is already targeting them down. The Noldorin Blade Masters are blocking their way though. They're defending my archers and they're going to cut down Arthedain Men-at-Arms and Dunedain Rangers by the dozen. If we look over here as well, what's left of my Sylvan Spearmen are being finished off by the Beng and Thranduil's bodyguards. How will this go? However, you can actually see over here the Mythlon Nobles, the chariots. They could still be very useful for us. They could harry individual units and break them, and they are javelins, of course. They can do a lot of damage. So let's see what they can do. And of course, with their mass, they're going to be able to force their way through the elves. You can see they're just scything their way through the Elder Council Guards. Although I think one of them's stuck. Chariots still have... Their movement still looks a little bit strange. But they are undoubtedly much better than they once were. And as we see over here, the chariots are going to be charging into these here Ebang, getting a lot of damage done on them. Most of them will probably get back up. But it certainly looks impressive. And obviously they're going to be throwing... Well, they should be throwing javelins. I actually think they're not on fire at will. You can see that over here, this unit of Hiri Bang has been gutted by my Galathran nobles. Now the Mythlon nobles are firing their javelins. So this is going to be good for us. Hopefully they're going to be able to do a lot of damage. But unfortunately for us, the Elven javelins fire and the chariots are destroyed. Much like Mumakil, chariots are deathly weak to hand-thrown projectiles, it would seem. So they sort of fall into that category. So if you see chariots or Mumakil, hit them with javelins and the unit will evaporate. But they were doing quite a lot of damage to the defence, and if we have managed to hold on to them, and if those javelins have managed to do their damage as well as getting some nice charges on individual units, we could have forced some of these to break, and we could have maybe clawed our way back into this fight in spite of the many, many mistakes we have made up to this point. But without them, things are going to be very bleak for us. I mean, if you look there, we have managed to sort of pull it back again to 6%, but without the chariots we're going to probably be hunted to extinction at this point. So within 6% is as close as we're going to get, which does constitute a close game. And considering the litany of mistakes we made, we really should have spread one army on each gate. And obviously, like, individual units being wasted, that sort of thing. Had we played better, this battle should have been ours, because if they had had to cover every gate, they simply wouldn't have had the melee infantry, I don't think, to deal with us. And again, if I was to redo this battle with exactly the same factions, and crucially knowing that the enemy was going to go skirmish heavy, obviously you can't really ask your opponent to do that, but in hindsight I definitely would not have picked 4 units of low tier archers. I probably would have only had my general be my only archer unit, and obviously bring the javelins as well. Maybe bring a couple of units of javelins, and then the rest just infantry. Well, if you look over here, this is basically the cleanup crew. A couple of units of dismounted knights for Numenus, formerly known as the dismounted Dunedain Knights. We've got no answer to these. Even if we were able to sort of form a nice defence around my Galathran nobles and just shoot the enemies as they came forward, even with all of the ammo my Galathran nobles had, I doubt I would be able to kill off this very elite Arthedain heavy infantry unit. They're just too tanky. And at this point, of course, we're sort of coming into the dying embers of this fight. What's left of my Elven Javelins has been crushed to death in between the Elder Council Guards, the Hiri Bang and the dismounted Knights of Numenus, as the other unit continues towards my archers. And you can also see the Dunedain Trolls there. Most of what the enemy has left is pretty elite units as well. The Elder Council Guards are largely all gone at this point though. There's all those dead Hiri Bang. The Noldorin Blade Masters though, in melee, are monsters. They've managed to just destroy units that came forward, as you would expect from a very elite Elven unit like this. But obviously at this point they're going to end up being overwhelmed at some point very soon. You can see the Elder Council bodyguards and the Hiri Bang are on the way. Something else which was happening throughout the battle is this unit of 4 Linden Archers was kind of blocking my Galathrim Nobles' advance up the tower. So all of these units down here had been basically running into the tower continuously. So it was only about 2/3 of my unit that was actually up on the walls all this time. They still did a very admirable job at combating what was left of the enemy skirmishers at that point. They also took a few losses themselves. Galathrim Nobles, still a very strong unit of course, and you can see that they are about to be engaged in melee by the dismounted Knights of Illuminus, and when the unit is scattered like this, they're not going to stand much of a chance. Even with the help of these 4 Linden Archers, Arthur Dane are going to be the end of me here. There are the dismounted Knights of Illuminus. There's a very weird death animation. Oh, it's that one, where they sort of spaz out and then go 2D sprite. And this is going to be it. Just trying to think. Here we go. So we can basically see the 2 last stands of our most elite units. The Noldorin Blade Masters trying to take on Mirkwood, although they're being shot. The indignity of it all. The Dunedain Troll Slayers ripping them apart. And then over here you can see what's left of my Galathrim Nobles standing their ground against the dismounted Knights of Illuminus. I would be interested to see how well the Galathrim Nobles did in a situation where they weren't sort of hopelessly surrounded and such. And also sort of their unit was cut in half, basically. I don't know what's up with my headphones at the moment, they've gone a little bit strange. But, nonetheless, it's at the end of the battle, so it's not too important. Obviously, the dismounted Arthur Dane Knight's going to slowly but surely destroy my nobles. These 4 Linden Archers are actually not being engaged thus far, although the Dunedain Troll Slayers are about to. And the 4 Linden Archers are the slightly lower tier Linden Archer. So this is going to be the end. So the defenders win, and there are no orcs, so no one can be mad that the orcs won. And it's an interesting map. Obviously there's a few glitchy things, like the gate, obviously the Linden Initials assault kind of went a bit weird with the ram. But if this battle is played, it's definitely a 4v3 or 5v3 or 4v4 map. And obviously you want to attack down every avenue, because if you allow yourself to get focused down on this map, particularly if you're up against Mirkwood, the firing positions they've got up on that ridge over there, pretty lethal. And there we go. That was me admitting defeat, because my troops were actually taking quite a long time to die. And I think Lord of Balagost admits defeat shortly after me.
Our allies have fled the field like
there we go. Well, actually, yeah, there we go. So as you can see, Imladris obviously had the hardest job going through the 2 gates, and they were destroyed quickest, so it's not really surprising they got the least amount of kills. They got a decent amount next to myself and Linden, considering they had to take on 2 gates. Mirkwood, of course, getting the lion's share of the kills. Those skirmishes were very lethal, particularly in this situation. Again, a more varied assault. Goes to show that 3 Elven factions have their disadvantages as well. On the attack anyway. If you want a more varied assault, the Dwarves would certainly have helped here. But the Elven Javelins getting 100 kills, although my most effective unit was actually a unit of Lorien Axemen getting 198. That was the unit that I think cut their way through a unit of Hobbits, so it's not really high quality kills. You can see that most of my units are getting kind of similar amounts of kills. I got the most amount of kills on our team by only 10 troops, so again, well played to the defenders though. They didn't really make any sort of mistakes, so it's not surprising that they won, considering we made some rather big ones. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. It's obviously a siege preview. Hopefully there'll be a couple of more siege previews that I can show as well, just to show sort of larger battles, or maybe a map that's got a bit more featureful, like maybe Anduin or something like that, to show a river crossing, that sort of thing. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.